Welcome to the Get to Know Your IDA podcast. My name is Robbie Ann McPherson. I'm the Marketing and Communications Director for the Erie County Industrial Development Agency. And we do this podcast to debunk myths, to offer some education, and hopefully to help the community understand the benefits that the IDA and economic development professionals bring to our community. Today, we're very excited to have a guy who's been around for 2 decades in the economic development local scene. We have Tom Kucharski, who is the president and CEO of Invest Buffalo Niagara. Welcome, Tom.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm okay. We've got a ton to talk about here, and I'm really excited that you're with us because I know probably more than anybody, you can explain the value of incentives in our community and why we need them. So why don't we just start out, for anyone who's not familiar with Invest Buffalo Niagara, just give us a little Cliff's Notes version of what you guys do for the community.
So we were, Western New York is one of the last communities in the country to put together an organization like ours. We are a 501c6 and a 501c3 public-private not-for-profit. That's an initiative on both the public and private sector to market our community for the purpose of attracting new investment, new jobs, keeping investment here and growing it and retaining jobs, and also helping the startup and innovation economy thrive. And so about 95% of our revenue or investment, if you will, that we use for that purpose comes from the private sector. About 5% comes from the public sector. We have a board of directors, and we basically work with the almost 140 partners in the 8-county area to put our community, our strengths and our assets in front of decision makers in the hopes of attracting growth in our community.
Very, very important work, but I think for a lot of the community, it's kind of unseen, right? I mean, people don't realize that when a company chooses Buffalo over someplace else, most often it's been because of your organization and advocacy and things like that. So can you talk to us a little bit too about what's the process? So you might hear about, let's say you hear about a company, a manufacturer that's looking for a new site, and you think that there's a site in Buffalo that might work. Is that the way it works, or are you out there pounding the pavement? Tell us how the jobs get created.
It's kind of all the above. I mean, it's a lot of science, but it's also part art form. So we use our resources, as I said, to put our messaging, whether it's attending events before COVID, that was a lot more frequent, or participating in trade shows, trade council missions, working with existing companies, working with our partners who may come across in their work, the IDAs, the municipal governments, architects, real estate folks. They may come across opportunities to bring new investment here, or they may come across a situation where one of our companies is looking to be attracted away from the region, or they're part of an international company that's doing mergers and acquisitions and they're at risk, or there's an opportunity to expand the facility here with startups. We're working with all the folks in the startup space to help companies get a start here and then connect them to a lot of our existing businesses so that they'll have a line of business and a chance to grow. So it really is, it's from all different approaches, and it requires you to be very focused and very versatile at the same time.
So kind of like the ultimate Buffalo boosters.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm glad you mentioned a few minutes ago job retention. And there's just so much that I'm trying to cram in here in the few minutes that we have. But let's touch on that for a second. People often look at job creation statistics as the measure of a success for a company or a group like yours, even for us at the ECIDA. But I think very often they miss how important it is to keep the jobs that we already have. So can you address a little bit about some of the challenges? I think that's kind of interesting. If a company might be in danger of moving that's already here, maybe talk a little bit about that.
So traditionally, and by any degree of metrics using the data and information that's out there, anywhere between 80 and 85% of all job creation in a town, a city, a region, a state comes from existing business. But who gets the headlines in social media or on the newspaper or electronic media is the new company coming to town. And so there's always a balance that needs to be struck with trying to grow the economy with bringing in new companies and making sure that our existing companies who are doing it every day and trying to make profits and keep their doors open and grow in our market, that they feel appreciated too. And there's a symbiotic relationship between the two. If a company is investigating our region, they're very smart usually, big and small. They'll check out who else is in their industry, what other complementary companies might be in their industry that they can do business with. And if those folks are not having a good experience in our community, you can guess that we're not going to stay on that list for a new investment. And then also our existing industry folks can be a great source for new opportunities for us to pursue. They may have, especially now, and what coming, hopefully, fingers crossed, we've been saying this for a couple of years, coming out of the pandemic, they may have suppliers, vendors, like assembly, service providers, depending on what business they're in, that are experiencing some difficulty in the market that they're in and would love to have them here. And so supply chain, science chain, that's real stuff. I mean, we're hearing a lot about it in the paper and how it's affecting our daily lives. But it's affecting companies' abilities to be profitable and to continue their work. So these are all opportunities, and they're also threats. And so you got to stay in touch with your existing industries and help them be successful with a whole myriad of things that we do, including a new program that we just launched, which is called Economic Gardening, which has been successful in a lot of other places around the country, right down the thruway in Rochester. And that's basically looking at second tier companies that have kind of gotten past the startup and are doing well, but they're kind of plateaued. And it's a program that's nationally accredited that gives them free of charge to them advice on finding new markets, on using technology, on marketing, on connecting with other industries, and in the hopes that by us giving them this resources and be supportive to them, that they will stay here and they will grow here, rather than a lot of these companies are prime pickoff targets for other communities looking to bring a new and fast growing company to their region. So there's a lot involved with existing industries. They're all going through their own challenges. Some coming through the pandemic have been their clusters have been pretty successful. Others are really struggling. And so we try with the resources that we have and working with our partners to try and stay in touch with them the best we can before, it's either discussed in the media that they're leaving or that they're having difficulty, because then it's usually too late to do anything about it.
Maybe we could do a better job of helping them understand what we do. But as you said, when a company is leaving, it's a headline, and very often the reaction from the community is, well, can't you do something? Please do something. Stop this company from leaving. But really, the unseen part of your work is what you're doing right now, right? It's preventative. Right. Yeah. So, and I love that. A program like that, like economic gardening, perfect example of something that many people might not realize. This is all going on behind the scenes. Right. There's just a constant tending to the garden of, our economic ecosystem.
Right.
And I think that would be a nice dovetail to talk about what agencies like ours, like ECIDA does, which is administering the incentives. Talk about why it's important for our community here to offer incentives, whether it's sales tax breaks or future property tax breaks, et cetera. Why do we need those?
Well, for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is a lot of other communities are using incentives smartly also. The primary reason you want to use incentives is that you have some, it depends on whether you're working with a life science company or somebody that's working in advanced manufacturing or logistics or whatever. Usually, and unfortunately, the older parts of the country have challenges in infrastructure, public services, tax situation. We've just been at it a lot longer than other places. And so there's inherently a cost delta to do a project here versus doing it somewhere else. And that, with that said, we have lots of advantages here that help level that playing field. But if we can promote our region and use the ability when there is a return on investment for our community by hiring local folks and putting fallow properties or buildings back on the tax roll and creating opportunity for our residents, it makes perfect sense to abate some of that future revenue to have that opportunity. It also, there's many other incentives that can be used, not just the IDAs, and that's something that gets lost often in discussion. It's a compartmentalized kind of process, either in the media or just perceptually among our population. There's usually a whole cadre of incentives and cost factors that are involved in a company, big and small, choosing where they're going to go next. And it's not just the IDA, it's not just the power company, it's not just the real estate offering, it's not the support of building a road or connecting to a stormwater. It's all of those things. And right. And one of the things that we all know and is well known now, but we saw this coming 10 years ago, was the cliff on labor, availability of labor, and the cost of labor, and where to find future labor, and all of that gets put into this big bowl. And that's what we have to, in our capacity, work with all of our partners to present the best business proposal to the company that we can. And so there's often a discussion about, well, why did we give that company a sales tax break, or why was there an abatement on their taxes? Well, it's because economic development is not a game of inclusion. It's a game of elimination. It's kind of like sports. And you're just trying to stay in the game long enough to land an opportunity. And if you just decide that that's just not what we're going to do, well, because we are in New York in general, upstate is usually less, but we tend to be a higher cost alternative for companies and where else they can go. And if you don't have that holistic approach where incentives are a big piece of that, then you're probably not going to be competitive. Right.
Competitive is everything. And as you said, I think that's a wonderful way to put it, that it's, it's really trying to stay in the game long enough, because the opportunities, they're not really in our control, other than, a program like your economic gardening it's sort of a waiting game, like, oh, wait, here's a company that wants to come here. How can we help them? And the incentive packages, I try to bring this up whenever it comes up. I think a lot of people misunderstand how they work, and they think, sometimes there is a grant or sometimes there is some kind of a cash incentive. But for example, for the ECIDA, it's a discount on future taxes. And in order to get that discount, you actually have to make an investment. So you don't get the sales tax break unless you spend, X millions of dollars on equipment and construction, et cetera. And the property tax break doesn't come until the project is finished, the assessment is made, and it's the difference between, the full assessment and the previous assessment. That's where you're getting the tax break, right? So the bottom line is, if the project goes somewhere else, that money never existed. Right? It's not a bucket that we're taking or we're pulling money from somewhere else. It's just not how it works. And I'm not sure why that's a resistant concept. But
well, I mean, not to call anybody out individually, but we have a congresswoman on the other end of the state who single-handedly and much to her celebration, killed one of the largest deals New York State will ever have a few years ago, and proclaimed that she saved the state billions of dollars, when in fact, to your point, those dollars never existed if the project didn't exist. And it's the same with the state's incentives. If you don't create jobs, you don't get incentives. And for the listeners, if you don't perform against what you promised at the local level or the state level or whatever, those benefits are going to be clawed back from you because you promised to do something and you didn't do it. So there is not it's to your point, there's an oftentimes a confusion as to, we have this money tree in the back, and we go out and we just pluck it and give it to companies. And that's not the case at all. There's a very thoughtful process for evaluating the opportunity and the value of it. And then there's incentives that are extended with a return on investment that is then promised by the company and the incentive giving agency. And if that's not reached, then there's remedies for that. So I don't know how you could go about it any more thoughtfully than, the way that we do it, because again, it's not a giveaway. It is a investment, if you will, against future either tax revenues or other benefits, and going into it with a partnership with the company that says, look, if you agree to do this level of investment and create this many jobs, then we will extend this benefit on behalf of the community to make that happen here. And the biggest point is, if you don't do it, there's other places that are. You can't do a national moratorium. I mean, this has been talked about for forever, as long as I've been in the business. Well, we ought to put a stop to this incentives. Well, yeah, except that we're a collection of 50 states and that make up our country. And, there's always going to be probably a solid block of at least 20 of them that this is the way they do business, by extending incentives. And they tend to be the lower cost places to do business. What's often lost is that companies that make those decisions purely on incentives, they usually wind up regretting it, because what they find is that the state or the region that is extending an outrageous incentive is usually doing so for a reason. They usually are deficient in their educational system. They have traffic problems. They have a number of problems that are stopping them from being competitive. And so what they do is they get the legislature together and they agree to a bunch of incentives. And we've actually had some companies here throughout the years that have come back from taking advantage of a big incentive deal somewhere else and come back and do business here, because all of the other things that's necessary to be successful in business are here. That's why we have to be thoughtful about how we do incentives, which I think we do a very good job of.
Agreed. And the workforce, I think you brought that up a while back. our workforce is pretty incredible, and it's not that we don't also have some of the shortages and the employment problems that are kind of affecting the entire country, maybe the world. But for example, you have and you won an award, right? Invest Buffalo Niagara won an award for your Be in Buffalo campaign.
We did, yeah, national award.
And it's a wonderful campaign. Just talking about the benefits of living here, just quality of life benefits. And it's important to do things like that and remind people that this is such a great place to raise a family, to live and work and play, etc. Because when a company's looking for that place, they're looking for the workforce. They need employees. So talk a little bit about some of the workforce challenges that other companies are having and how our region actually might be able to solve them for them.
So, as you've seen, as the listeners may have seen over the last several months, we've had some of the largest, if not largest, resignation rates of employment all across the country. And we're not immune to that here. The advantage that we have here is the quality of life is very high. We, the accolades that are given to our area as far as, our schools, our cultural amenities, our recreation, big time sports, right down the road from Canada, a whole myriad of things that's recognized by a number of publications and ratings. And we're also, my elevator speech to somebody who doesn't know Buffalo in Western New York is that we're the Midwest of the Northeast. And so
that's great.
That's kind of, that's really impactful now because, workers are, even once we get past, there we go again, saying get past, hopefully we will get past this COVID thing, but places like us that are a little bit more spread out, but we're still cosmopolitan. We're near a lot of other larger cities. They're getting much greater looks from people looking to start businesses, entrepreneurs, and innovators that are looking to connect with assets and either bring a company or create a company, and companies in general that have exhausted the ability to recruit companies in traditional markets are looking at second, third tier markets, a little bit safer, a little bit more spread out, and still have the amenities of a large region. So we play really well in that. The challenge that we have is that we don't lose, contrary to popular belief in all the data that's out there, we don't lose, the brain drain thing. People more than other places. In fact, in the last census, we actually gained considerable population. And that's often masked by the fact that the state is losing population, but that tends to be on the other side of the state. The challenge that we have here is we're far below the national average of people moving to our region. And so we're employing everybody we got that's available to be in the workforce, but we just don't have the infusion of new workers that can keep up with the demand of the companies they have for openings. And so that's what Be in Buffalo is all about. And we're, again, unfortunately, our region is a little late to the party on this, but we're catching up quick. And that is to bring expats back, to keep the kids that are going to school here, to connect to workers that want to transition to other things, keep them in the region and work with our workforce training partners to connect them to opportunities, focus on racial and social diversity to try and take advantage of the underserved communities that have a lot to offer, our immigrant population. And we do this we used a consultant and a task force for about a year before we actually launched it. The best thing that I think our region has, and if you talk to site selectors and company officials, is that it's unique in that you only have to be here for a couple of days and you feel like you're part of a community, even if you're new to the place.
Yeah.
And that's something that companies and people are looking for these days. And so we designed Be in Buffalo to be kind of telling that story from the perspective and the lens of people that have just moved here, people that have stayed here, different genders, different races, different ethnicity, lifestyle. And so if you go on it, you can see a whole compendium of things that, somebody just like you may have experienced here. And here's what they found in our region. We also have added different tools on it. There's a cost of living calculator. There's all sorts of things that take you through, if you did move here, what assistance there is to get you going, and what the process is going to be like. And really, unfortunately, a lot of other regions have been at this for a lot of years before us. We're starting to catch up on that. But if we don't fix that problem, we're going to continue to create opportunities, and there's just not going to be enough workers here to actually keep those efforts going. And then we're at the risk of losing what we've attracted here and what we tried to keep here to other places because they simply can't find the labor.
I came back home about 10 years ago, and I think one of the greatest things we have here is that it's relatively easy to live here.
Yeah.
We might have a little bit of snow or something now and then, but the challenges of day-to-day life, just going to the grocery store, getting your laundry done, getting your car fixed, and all those little things. If you live somewhere else and you come to Buffalo, or you grew up here and moved someplace else, you realize how much easier things are. Part of it is everything's 20 minutes away, the old joke.
Yeah.
Everything in the city is 20 minutes apart. But the other part is the businesses, the communities, the relationships that you develop. There's a lot of kind of fellowship everywhere you look. There are softball groups and bowling teams, and you might not think about those things when you're going, should I move to this city or that city? But that's what makes up your everyday life. Compared to, anybody that's ever lived in Manhattan and had laundry to do.
Yeah. When I lived in the DC area for 8 years, I lived in mileage closer than I do now to downtown Buffalo where I work. And here it takes me half an hour to get to work, and pretty routinely. And in DC, it could have, for a shorter distance, could have taken me anywhere from an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had the same experience in LA.
Yeah. So, the one thing you notice is you have a lot more time and you have a lot less stress. And how do you translate all that good stuff that we know here? How do you convey that to somebody else that we want to have here, bring their knowledge and their wealth and the ability to become part of our community? That's what our challenge is. So it's got to be part lifestyle and it's got to be part business opportunity.
Correct. Because they each depend on each other.
Right.
If it's easy and wonderful to live here, but you can't find a job, well, that's difficult.
Right.
If you can find a job, but it's not so great and, the other amenities are lacking. Yeah, I agree. And all of the agencies, your agency, our agency, Visit Buffalo, Niagara, working on the tourism aspect, and Empire State Development working from the state angle. There are just so many people that are working at this, and I feel it's very important. That's kind of why we started this podcast, just to start getting into these details and have a little forum to talk about it, in longer than 8-second sound bites.
Yeah. And, it's interesting in that, there's churn in our business community. There's churn in elected folks. There's churn in public officials. And it seems like it's every week that we'll be on some call and there'll be some discussion about, we ought to promote our region to workers. And so then, you'd be in Buffalo. And while on the call, they'll look at that and they go, this is great. How come I didn't know about this? I'm going to use this. Can we do something where so there's a whole bunch of exercise and we're going to ramp it up because we've been given considerable assistance from ESD and from our local foundations and our utilities. So starting next month, you're going to see this get a much larger profile. There's going to be all sorts. We have done things in the past, like had an intern takeover of Seneca One, where we had over 250 interns come and talk to over 35 companies. We've had virtual happy hours across the country hosted by Steve Tasker, kind of inviting expats to learn more about what's going on here, and having different folks message that. We've had job fairs, career fairs, all sorts of things, and you'll start to see that really ramp up the next 3 years now that we have resources to do it.
All right, and you said the magic word, resources.
Yeah.
So whenever I encounter someone who wonders why, how come this isn't everywhere, and how come these messages aren't bigger, and it takes a lot of resources to have $1 million ad campaign. You have to have $1 million.
Yeah.
So I think we're all, at least from the ground, from our level, we are all really making some pretty great strides considering our limited resources and limited bandwidth and manpower. Our staffs aren't huge. But you're right. There's so much room for improvement, and always just keeping your eye on the prize of having people come to us instead of, oh, I didn't know this was here. Right. They call you up and say, hey, I saw your
right. Yeah.
flipping that thing around. Well, I appreciate we have actually gone overtime.
Oh, okay.
So I appreciate so much, Tom, your taking the time to share your thoughts with us. And is there anything that you think we ought to cover? One last point for today?
I would just say that you kind of hit it on the head. You got to keep going. And I think that what we maybe newcomers or the new generations in our community don't understand is that, we were at one time, we were the 8th wealthiest city in the country. And we had all of those big industries here that were doing really great things, which, a lot of what we have to work with is legacy to that. But a lot of them are gone. And so, we now have to rebuild our economy based on what we have always been based on, which is innovation. And so we now have a great opportunity in front of us. You talked about resources. The challenge that we have is that you look at other places that we traditionally compete with, they have 50, 60, 70 world national headquarters in their community that can be philanthropic, that can help efforts like all of ours. We don't have that. We're going to start building it back. You can already see it starting to happen. So everybody's got to be proactive Buffalo, Western New York, Buffalo, Niagara boosters. And because you never know who you're going to be sitting next to on a plane or visiting on vacation or interacting with in a business meeting that could bring an opportunity here. And so we all got to be on board that if you, in my case, I'm in my 21st year, if you would have said 20 years ago, this is what we would have going forward, I would say, yeah, I'll take that all day. And we've got a good chance to be competitive in the future. So everybody's got to hang in there and be positive.
Yes, agreed. It's not easy.
No, it isn't.
Especially the last 2 years.
That's right.
I think that's taken a lot out of us all. But but you're right. You're right. It's kind of a mission. I know that's how our agency looks at it, and our board. And we're lucky to have some really, really great people that work with us, and yourself included. So thank you so much for sharing. And just one more time, let people know how they can find you on the web or contact IBN if they need to.
Sure. So on the business side and the website that we use for attraction and all of our resources and assets and tools that we can use to help business, that's www.buffaloniagara.org. And then on the attraction, hey, this is interesting. I had no idea all this was going on, and how can I come here and be part of this? That's www.beinbuffalo.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. And thank you again, Tom Kucharski, President and CEO of Invest Buffalo Niagara, joining us here on the Get to Know Your IDA podcast. Thanks for joining us. I'm Robbie Ann McPherson, the Director of Marketing and Communications for the Erie County Industrial Development Agency, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.